This is A Deeper Listen from KEXP. I'm Emily Fox, and before we get into today's show, I want to let you know that this is the second to last episode of this podcast. A Deeper Listen is retiring. If you've been following the show for a while and have liked what you heard, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. It would really mean a lot. The good news is, we're not done yet. And I really loved this interview I'm about to share today. It's with the electronic artist SHIMA about her debut album, Welcome to SHIMAJIMA. SHIMA was born in the US, but raised in Tokyo, Japan. She says this album is for the culturally homeless like herself. Born in many multicultural environments, there isn't one culture that feels completely like home. Much of the album fuses electronic dance with traditional Japanese sounds. You hear this on her tracks Sunset, Maitake, 1807, Awa, and Shiawase. When you go to SHIMA's Instagram page, she shares the story of how, quote, I used to be in a Japanese pop music cult. Then I escaped to go to the US to go to college and went so crazy with my newfound freedom that I ended up in Miami-Dade County Jail. So I decided to get my shit together and major in computer engineering and actually got so into C++ that I graduated and got a full-time job as a software engineer. Then after a few years working a 9-to-5 as a developer, I became so restless that I decided to quit and become a full-time DJ producer.
Now here I am, fully independent and just making what I want to make after starting off in the complete opposite, most regimented, structured side of the industry.
I caught up with SHIMA to hear about her journey from J-pop to independent DJ producer, and she ended up giving a mini history lesson when she broke down the stories behind some of the songs on this record. But first, her backstory. So the title of the album is called Welcome to SHIMAJIMA, and Shima, I understand, is a Japanese word for island, and SHIMAJIMA is just kind of this fictional island that you've created as part of this album. Tell me more about this island that you've created for yourself for this album.
SHIMAJIMA is a fictional island that I created as a result of kind of being raised in this very multicultural international background where, you know, I grew up in Japan, but my father's American. I spoke English at home, and I went to international school, various international schools in Japan where my other classmates were other mixed kids, or like they were from Nepal, or they'd be from Sri Lanka, or they'd be from the UK or Australia. So we were all kind of, I guess there is a name for us. It's called third culture kids. Kids who grow up in a different culture than their family is from. So I kind of grew up in this culture of other kids who don't really have like a fixed home or a fixed culture, or wherever they go, they're kind of an outsider. And growing up in this environment where there's just so many different languages, so many different cultures, so many different foods that I was exposed to types of music, it kind of ties back into when I was told when I first started going into dance music to pick a genre and stick to it. The thing about genres is that to me, they feel so heavily rooted in a specific culture or place. Dancehall, for example, being Jamaican, techno, even like having very kind of heavy ties with Berlin, even though it's originally from Detroit. Yeah. So I felt like none of these places are really my home. So why don't I just invent my own genre of music that is just kind of a blend of all of my different cultures and my influences. So I was like, okay, if I was to make my own culture based on my own a place that doesn't exist, I will call it Shima Island. I wanted to create a metaphorical an island where that is our home, where we don't get the, oh, your English is so good, or oh, your Japanese is so good, or, if you're from Africa, why are you white?
So I want to hear more about you growing up in the J-pop world. You had mentioned that J-pop was like very regimented, and now you are, your own producer. You are making your own music independently. And so can you talk a little bit more about like that difference of being totally independent, doing it all on your own versus what the J-pop world was like for you? Like, first off, just describe what being in a J-pop group was like for those that like aren't super familiar.
The typical J-pop, K-pop artist, I actually would consider them performers and not artists. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because they are usually not actually creating any of the art. They're performers, but they're not writing any of the lyrics. They're not choreographing any of the dances. They're not styling any of their own clothes. They're playing a part in a production, like a musical or a play, right? Mm-hmm. Where everything else about even who the members of the group are, and this formula is reaching the U.S. too. I'm not going to name specific names, but there are groups now here in the U.S. which are, none of the actual performers in the group are doing any of the creative parts of it, which again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I don't mean to like sound like I'm throwing any shade or anything like that. It's just that I realized that when I was doing that's not what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I wanted to actually be making the art, not just performing the art that was handed to me to perform. So in the J-pop world that I was in, it's extremely, extremely, extremely regimented. I could not make any decisions for myself, down to what color my hair was, what color my nails were, how long my hair was. Every single, anything I posted on Instagram had to be pre-approved. So I went from not having to make any of my own decisions and just being told what to do, and my job was to follow orders, to swinging to the complete opposite direction, where now nobody is telling me what to do. I am responsible for making all of the decisions. I have all of the freedom, which is what I wanted. But I realized that in and of itself is also difficult. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easier to just be told what to do. This album, Welcome to SHIMAJIMA, creating this album, which all in all took 2 years, was the process of finally getting to that point, right? Of like finding my own inner compass again, finding my own inner voice again, and like leaning into it and learning how to trust it, and finally giving myself directions, finding my own directions.
So I saw an Instagram post where you described your transition from J-pop to spending time in Miami-Dade County Jail to software engineer to DJ producer. Yes. So you're like all over the place. Walk us through that story.
Oh man, yes. So like I said, in middle school, high school, I was in this J-pop group where every single aspect of my life was controlled. I mean, I did, in that Instagram post you're referring to, I called it a cult.
Yeah.
And, people think I'm exaggerating, but it really was a softcore cult. And so when I left and I decided to come to the US to study, all of a sudden I had all of this freedom. I was not being super responsible, and I got caught with some weed in my freshman dorm room, which is now legal, but at the time,
That's what you got busted with.
yes, I was just had weed in my dorm room. That's it. So I went to jail, and while I was in jail, I kind of realized, okay, I need to get my shit together. What am I gonna do? So that's shortly after I came out of jail was when I decided I'm going to really buckle down and study engineering, and so that when I graduate, like can get a good job, stable career. So I got really into C++, started, and then I graduated, got a full-time 9-to-5 job as a software engineer. But the original goal, the main goal had always been one day I want to make a living off of making my own music. So
Here we are. So let's talk about this debut record. Again, this is called Welcome to SHIMAJIMA. And there is a lot of Japanese influence on this record, whether that be like some tonal structures we hear or the language that's used or some sampling as well. Can you tell me about some of the Japanese folk song samples that ended up on this album?
A good example is Awa. There's a track called Awa, which I called Awa because I'm sampling sounds and music from this dance festival that happens every summer in Japan called Awa Odori. And it occurred to me while I was at one of these festivals like a couple summers ago that even though this is a traditional folk song and traditional music and dance festival that goes back hundreds of years, I realized, this is not that different from raving and rave culture. Every culture in the world throughout all of history, humans have been doing some form of getting together in big groups and making music or playing music and dancing forever. And incorporating these traditional elements and these folk music elements is kind of, in my mind, like a way of keeping that alive, but in its modern form. I don't think just because certain cultural practices or pieces of music are quote unquote historic or traditional, that means we have to put it in a glass box in a sterile museum somewhere where no one can touch it.
Can you also tell me the backstory or the tale behind your song Maitake?
Are you familiar with the Maitake mushroom?
No, I wasn't before I read the backstory of this.
Okay, but like the shiitake mushroom.
Okay, yeah, shiitake, yeah.
Shiitake,
So
yeah.
in my Midwestern accent, shiitake, yeah.
The shiitake mushroom is a type of mushroom. The maitake mushroom is another type of mushroom. They sell it at Whole Foods. It's just a normal mushroom they sell in most American grocery stores too. But the Japanese word for maitake literally translates to dancing mushroom. Mai means dancing and take means mushroom. And so I just thought one day, why is this called dancing mushroom? So I did some Googling and I stumbled upon this old folk story from Kyoto, back before it was called Kyoto. I don't know, must have been 16th century Japan or something. And basically it's about a bunch of people who got lost in the woods one day, and they were starving and they got hungry, so they decided to eat an unknown mushroom, mysterious mushroom, and they couldn't stop dancing for hours. And they couldn't figure out why, and they just thought it was super weird, but they didn't die, And so that's why it's called the dancing mushroom. And I'm pretty sure what they ate was not the maitake mushroom.
Yeah.
I think they ate a different mushroom that looked similar.
Right.
And when I read this folk story, it just blew my mind, because this is not common knowledge. If like I said, I grew up in Japan my whole life. I speak fluent Japanese. I grew up eating maitake mushroom all the time. And so I asked my friends, my Japanese friends, and my mom was like, do you guys know why this mushroom is called dancing mushroom? None of them had heard this story. And so I realized, like, oh my God, this whole time we've all been calling this mushroom, people eat this mushroom all around the world. We've all been calling this the dancing mushroom because some people in Japan hundreds of years ago tripped in the woods on accident. And nobody knows about this? Like, this is crazy.
So this song is letting the world know that happened.
And this also ties back into the SHIMAJIMA thing. People all over the world throughout history have been doing the same things. There's so many different versions of this same story in every country in the world. I think there are stories I've heard in medieval Germany, where mysteriously there were epidemics of villages that were people just couldn't stop dancing.
Yes. I was just reading about this. Yeah.
Yes. And even like the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, there's theories that it happened because they got ergot poisoning, right? Ergot, which is a common mold that apparently grows on sourdough and bread. Oh. And it makes you hallucinate.
Oh gosh, okay.
Yeah. And so there's one common theory as to why the Salem witch trials happened was because there was a case of ergot poisoning. So they were all tripping.
Oh my gosh.
They were all hallucinating. So to tie it back, I heard this story of these people hundreds of years ago in Japan tripping on mushrooms in the woods, and why that's the maitake mushroom today is literally called dancing mushroom. And I obviously had to make it into a song.
One of your songs is called The Myth of Kamikaze, and I understand it's partially about the kamikaze suicide pilots who had crashed into planes and, into Allied targets in World War II. Tell me more about the myth of the kamikaze and just kind of the history and reflections that were on your mind when you were making this song.
Yes. So this is it's going to get way more serious than maitake.
Oh, yeah.
So this idea of self-sacrifice and unfortunately is still very prevalent in Japanese culture today. And we do have one of the highest suicide rates in the world, unfortunately. And it comes from this idea that some people feel like they're a burden.
Or there's shame.
Yeah, or there's shame, or for whatever reason, you think like eliminating yourself or self-destruction is somehow going to help other people. And that's exactly what these kamikaze pilots were told during World War II. The kamikaze pilots famously, what a lot of people don't realize is that most of these pilots were young boys. They were like 17, 18-year-old boys who really didn't have a choice. So there's this kind of image of like, Japanese people were just so fervent and they worshipped their emperor so much, and they were just so bloodthirsty that they were like willing to all kill themselves. These suicide pilots were just they loved their country so much. They're just, but really they were little boys, who didn't have a choice. And they were told, and they were like, really, the entire country of Japan was brainwashed during this period. And they were told that in doing this, in giving up your life for your country, and for your emperor, you will essentially be immortalized forever, and you can save your family. Your family will be honored by the country and the state, and essentially, by sacrificing yourself, you're guaranteed to save the rest of your family and their honor. And it's essentially like, do it for the greater good. Sacrifice yourself for the greater good. And it's a total myth, because not only did they self-sacrifice, but they also destroyed everything around them in the process. Ultimately, Japan lost the war, and what Japan did during World War II, pre-World War II, was awful. We were a colonial power, and we colonized like half of Asia. And it's just such an insane case of a country that was so deeply, and a population that was so deeply brainwashed that we were told that all this evil that we were doing, including self-sacrifice, was for a greater good. And that is a myth. There is no such thing as self-harm or self-sacrifice that is good for other people. So kamikaze translates to divine wind or God's wind. So they were told that if you get on these planes and you fly these pilots, you are becoming God's wind, and you are going to fly to essentially like save your country and your family, and like you're hurting yourself, but in you falling, you will lift everyone else up. And that mindset still exists in modern Japanese society, where a lot of people just feel like a burden on their family if they can't provide for their family, or for whatever reason, they feel like the world would be a better place without me. So by eliminating myself, by sabotaging myself, I will be unburdening my family or whatever it is. And it's a myth, because the whole point of the kamikaze pilots was to create destruction. They're literally bombers, right? So there is no form of self-harm, self-sabotage. The act is inherently selfish. Not selfish, but it's inherently destructive.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the message and the theme of the song. Please, I'd never heal, and you won't be free. ただのそういう風だと信じ、崖っぷちまで一人で行き、まさかの竜巻だった君。 全てを引き込み Don't wanna see you fall. They told you that you'll fly to spend the life you love. Kamikaze no SHIMA, Hitsubani-sa.
You end this album with a track called Shiawase. Tell me about that word, what it means, and why it was important to end the album on that note.
Shiawase, if you type it into Google Translate or whatever, it translates to happiness, but it means a lot more than just happiness, because happiness is fleeting, right? Shiawase is more of like a combination of happiness and also like just like a deep satisfaction with life. Mm-hmm. It's also when you feel really blessed and grateful. So, you know, there's just some moments in life where, say, you come home one day on your birthday and to a surprise, and all of your friends and family surprise you for your birthday, and you realize in that moment, like, wow, I'm so deeply loved. All these people that I care about, they showed up for me. And, you know, in that moment, like, yes, you're happy, but it's a little deeper than happiness, right? It's just this like kind of more like that feeling in your heart when you're just like overwhelmed with like feeling grateful, feeling loved, feeling content and satisfied. So that feeling is called shiawase. It was really important to me to end the album on that note and with that word, because that's how I felt, you know, making this album.
KEXP, we're all about music discovery, so we would love for you to give us a music recommendation. What's a song that you love that's not yours that you think everyone should hear?
Oh my gosh. My favorite song of all time, and I cry every time I listen to this song. It doesn't matter how many times I listen to it, I still cry every single time. And it's called, this is also another reason why my artist name is SHIMA, is because this is just one of my favorite songs. The song is called SHIMA Uta. Uta means song, so it just means island. It's called Island Song. But specifically the version by Rimi Natsukawa. That is my favorite song of all time. And if you look up the meaning behind the song, it's just the most beautiful, like moving lyrics for me and story.
And what are the lyrics? Like, what's the story that's being told in this song?
It's, are you familiar with the island of Okinawa?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an island on the very south of Japan. It's actually not originally a Japanese island. It was colonized by mainland Japan like some hundreds of years ago. It was the only battle during World War II that was the only land battle that was fought in Japan was on Okinawa. Mm-hmm. So Okinawa was a little tiny island that was colonized by mainland Japan, and they were essentially like the human shield for when the Americans invaded. And this island is just kind of like any other island in the Pacific. They've had a long history of just being colonized by every 10 years by a different power, you know. So they just have like, it's such a beautiful island with such an insane, rich history. And this song is just like such a peaceful, beautiful song. And at first listen, you're just like, oh, what a nice, calming song. And then you listen to the lyrics, and it's about from the perspective of somebody who was there during the Battle of Okinawa. And it's somehow, it's about something super serious, and yet it's still somehow just the most peaceful and beautiful song ever. And that's why every time I hear it, I cry every single time I hear it. And it's one of those songs that made me realize like how much I love music and how profound of an impact it can have on people. And it's just a large part of like why I wanted to start making music and start making my own music was because of how this song made me feel, you know. It just moved me so much that I was like, this music, this is what I gotta do.
Well, I've been speaking with Shima. Her debut album, Welcome to SHIMAJIMA, was recently released. Thank you so much for your time today, and congrats on the album.
Thank you so much.
And that was A Deeper Listen. The next episode of A Deeper Listen will be the final episode you hear on this feed. Me and many of the contributors of the show will share our favorite interview moments we had delivering you the hundreds of stories that have hit this feed over the years. If you like what you've heard from A Deeper Listen or the KEXP radio show Sound and Vision, please show a little love in the form of a rating or review so this podcast can live on for the next person to discover, and you've let them know that this is worth their time. And if you've been listening over the years, thank you. Thank you for listening. It really does mean the world.